Black sand shifts beneath the boots of the young Marines as the wind carries the distant echo of artillery deep, rolling, like the growl of some ancient beast. Ahead of them, rising from the volcanic landscape like a dark omen, stands Mount Suribachi. For days, they've watched it spit fire and steel, its tunnels vomiting snipers and machine gun bursts that cut men down before their feet even touched the sand. Every inch gained on this island has been paid for in blood. But on the morning of February 23, 1945, something changes. The mountain long believed impossible to take finale shows a crack in its armor. A patrol begins the slow ascent, unaware that their climb will define not only the battle, but the entire war in the Pacific. What happens next becomes one of the most enduring moments in military history. A moment that would echo far beyond the island of Iwo Jima into living rooms, newspapers, war bond drives, and eventually, into myth. Yet behind this moment lies a story far more brutal, harrowing, and human than the photograph the world remembers. Iwo Jima was barely 8 square miles of volcanic rock and island, so insignificant, on a map that many Marines had never heard its name before. 1945. But the men who stepped onto its sands quickly discovered that it was one of the most viciously defended fortresses Imperial Japan had ever created. The island sat halfway between the Mariana Islands and mainland Japan. To American planners, it was a strategic gem. Capturing it would provide emergency landing fields for crippled B-29 bombers. Returning from raids over Tokyo, thousands of airmen owed their lives to such a landing strip, even before it existed. To the Japanese, however, Iwo Jima was a forward shield. Losing it meant American bombers could now launch more frequent, more deadly attacks on the homeland. And for Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kurabayashi, commander of the island's defenses, it meant certain death. He knew Japan could not win the battle. His goal was something far more chilling: inflict maximum casualties. To make America bleed so heavily that she might hesitate before invading the mainland, Kurabayashi transformed the island into a labyrinth of steel and stone. Unlike previous Japanese commanders, he forbade suicidal banzai charges. He wanted his men underground, waiting, ambushing, disappearing. Every position was connected by tunnels. Every cave was a fortress. Every opening concealed a gun. And watching over it all like a dark sentinel was Mount Suribachi. On the morning of February 19th, the first wave of Marines stepped onto the island and immediately felt the earth tremble beneath them. For a moment, it seemed almost peaceful. The guns were silent. The beach looked empty. Then Kurabayashi gave the signal. A storm of fire erupted from the mountainside and from hidden pillboxes buried beneath the sand. Machine gun nests raked the shore. Mortar and artillery shells crashed down like thunder. Marines were caught in open ground with nowhere to hide. One veteran described it as walking straight into the mouth of hell. Iwo Jima wasn't a beach landing. It was a massacre in slow motion. Bodies piled in heaps along the sand. And the black ash so fine and loose it swallowed bootsmate, running almost impossible. Tanks became stuck. Vehicles stalled. Men crawled on their bellies, digging desperately for cover in a terrain that offered none. Yet hour by hour, through sheer willpower, the Marines pushed forward. And as they advanced, one thing became clear. The key to the entire battle was Suribachi. Take the mountain, and the island might fall. Leave it standing, and the Marines would die one battalion at a time. Mount Suribachi was not just a geographical feature, it was a fortress carved from volcanic stone. Inside its slopes ran a 7-mile network of tunnels with ammunition dumps, living quarters, and firing chambers that opened at every angle. Machine guns were placed behind steel doors that slid open only long enough to fire. Mortars were hidden in pits impossible to spot from the air. Even the airstrikes before the landing one of the heaviest bombardments of the war barely scratched the surface. To the Marines, looking up at the mountain, it felt alive. Every time a platoon moved forward, the mountain would blink suddenly, unleashing fire from a new position. Men swore the ground itself was shooting at them. Suribachi had to be taken. But climbing it meant moving through the very heart of the enemy's defenses. As the days passed, the mountain became an obsession for the men of the 5th Marine Division. The commanders wanted it. The Marines feared it. And the Japanese vowed to die defending it. By February 22nd, after 3 days of brutal fighting, U.S. forces had managed to surround the base of Mount Suribachi. It was time to send a patrol up the mountain. There was only one problem. Nobody knew what waited above. Japanese defenders could be hiding in any tunnel or cave. Entire units could be waiting for a final ambush. Mines and booby traps might line the path. And there was no guarantee the enemy had abandoned the summit. A young platoon leader, First Lieutenant Harold Schreier, was given the mission. Lead a 40-man patrol to the top and, if possible, raise a small American flag. It was a symbolic gesture, a morale booster for the men below. But to reach the summit, Schreier's men had to climb through loose, volcanic ash, jagged rocks, and hidden entrances to dark tunnels where defenders could be waiting in total silence. One Marine later said, "Every step felt like a step into a grave." Yet the patrol moved upward, slowly and methodically, guns trained on every shadow. The climb took several tense hours. To the surprise of the Marines, resistance was really light. The tunnels were empty, the defensive positions abandoned. Suribachi had moved his forces north, where he planned to make his final stand. When the patrol finally reached the summit, they saw the entire island stretching beneath them, and thousands of Marines staring upward in anticipation. It was time. A small American flag measuring barely 28 by 54 inches was attached to a length of iron pipe. As the Marines raised it into the smoky sky, cheers erupted from the beaches below. Ships offshore blasted their horns. Men cried. Men shouted. Some threw their helmets into the air. Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal, who had come ashore to observe the battle, reportedly said, "The raising of that flag means a Marine Corps for the next 500 years. But there was a problem. The flag was too small." Hundreds of men were craning their necks to see it, but it was hard to spot against the haze of battle. A larger flag was needed. And that's when a second group of Marines began to climb. The second flag was larger, bolder, unmistakable. And the act of raising it, just like the first, was meant simply as a practical replacement. No one in the unit believed they were about to create the most famous war photograph of all time. Joe Rosenthal, a civilian photographer working for the Associated Press, followed the second group up the mountain. He stumbled on loose ash most of the way, at times unsure he would reach the top in time. When he arrived, the Marines were already beginning to raise the new flag. He hurriedly lifted his camera, and in a single, unposed, nearly accidental shot, he captured the image that would transcend the war itself. 6 men thrusting the flagpole into the ground, their bodies leaning forward in unity, the wind snapping the flag, the battle-torn sky behind them. A moment of triumph, frozen amid unimaginable suffering. Rosenthal's photograph hit newspapers across the United States within hours. Americans saw hope, strength, victory. But for the Marines still fighting below, the battle was far from over. In fact, the worst was yet to come. Capturing Suribachi did not end the Battle of Iwo Jima. It marked only the beginning of a far more brutal campaign across the northern half of the island. As the flag fluttered above the mountain, Suribachi unleashed a nightmare of ambushes, sniper attacks, and crossfire from his underground strongholds. Some of the fiercest fighting, Motoyama, Airfield, Hill 382, the amphitheater, Turkey Noble ahead. Suribachi might have been the symbol. But the soul of the battle lay in the island's interior, where Marines fought an enemy they often never saw. The Japanese defenders fought with absolute desperation. Many refused to surrender. Some crawled out of tunnels at night to attack sleeping Marines. Others hid in chambers for days, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The Marines paid dearly for every hill, every ridge, every trench. By the end of the battle on March 26, 1945, more than 26,000 Marines had been killed or wounded. 2/3 of the island's 21,000 Japanese defenders were found dead. Most of the rest vanished into the tunnels, never to emerge. The island was secured. But the cost was almost too heavy to comprehend. The iconic flag-raising photograph quickly became more than a picture. It became a symbol of American resolve. Yet the story behind the image was tangled in confusion, tragedy, and misidentification. 3 of the 6 men in the photograph, Sergeant Michael Strank, Corporal Harlan Block, and Private First Class Franklin Sousley, were killed in action within days of the event. Others returned home to fame they didn't expect and didn't necessarily want. For decades, historians struggled to correctly identify every man in the photo. New evidence surfaced. Names changed. Families were notified, then corrected. The truth became as complex as the battle itself. But the meaning, that remained clear. The photograph didn't depict victory. Not truly. The battle raged for another month after it was taken. What it captured was something deeper, the moment hope rose on a battlefield soaked in suffering. A fragile symbol in the middle of unimaginable chaos. While the world celebrated the raising of the flag, General Suribachi continued directing his defense with astonishing discipline. He wrote letter after letter to his wife, each one secretly carried by a trusted aide. In these letters, he expressed sorrow, resignation, and admiration for the enemy's bravery. He forbade suicide charges until the very end. He made his men conserve ammunition. He ordered strategic withdrawals to prolong the fight. Kuribayashi's last known message, sent shortly before his final disappearance, was short and haunting. The battle is nearing its end. I have done everything possible to defend the island. No one knows exactly how Kuribayashi died. Some believe he led a final night charge. Others think he killed himself in a bunker to avoid capture. His body was never identified. In a sense, he remains on Iwo Jima, echo in the tunnels beneath the mountain he defended to the last breath. After the war, returning B-29 pilots credited Iwo Jima with saving over 25,000 American airmen, who used its runways as emergency landing fields. For the Marines, the battle became a defining chapter in their history defective. Tragic, yet filled with acts of extraordinary heroism. And Mount Suribachi, it became sacred ground. Today, the summit is quiet. The tunnels sealed. The beach is still black as ash. Visitors describe an eerie stillness like the island still remembers. The small flag that was first raised on February 23rd is preserved in the National Museum of the Marine Corps. The second flag, immortalized in photograph, rests in the National Museum of American History. But the memory of the men who fought there, the memory of the climb, the memory of the moment the flag touched the sky, those remain etched, not just in photographs, but in the spirit of a nation. Mount Suribachi was more than a battlefield. It was a graveyard, a fortress, a symbol. The men who climbed it did so, knowing they might never return. The men who raised the flag that day couldn't imagine their act would echo across generations. On an island, barely visible on a map, under a sky choked with smoke, a small group of Marines performed a simple act that would come to capture the cost, the courage, and the complexity of war. The flag they raised did not mark victory. It marked sacrifice, endurance, hope, amid horror. And in that moment, brief, fragile, and immortal, it marked the defining point of the Battle of Iwo Jima. And that concludes our journey into this extraordinary moment in history. If you enjoyed exploring the past with me, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss our next deep dive. Now it's your turn. What historical event should we uncover next? Share your ideas in the comments below, and your suggestion might be featured in a future video. Thanks for watching, and as always, keep seeking the stories that shaped our world.